I'm Mary Parker, and welcome to this episode of Eureka's Sounds of Science. Today I'm joined by Andrew Miner of the YWHAG Foundation. Andrew's son James was diagnosed with a mutation in the YWHAG gene, which affects the brain and leads to symptoms such as seizures, intellectual disabilities, and muscle tone issues, among others. Andrew joins us to share his foundation's work, his goals for the future, and share stories of a recent joyful family trip. Welcome, Andrew.
Thank you very much. It's so nice to meet you, Mary, and thank you, for the opportunity and to the entire Charles River team. So thank you.
We really appreciate you being here. James recently had the opportunity to take part in a Make-A-Wish Foundation trip, an experience that can mean so much to a child and their family. Could you share a bit about what this journey was like for him?
Yeah, it was really exciting. I still remember the day that, we got the phone call. Having a child with a rare disease is really hard, and it's, little things help get you through the day, and just even, something to, be excited or, cherish. And I remember we got that phone call that he was picked after a long process, and it was kind of a journey from, planning it, meeting, and to finally being able to do it. And we got the opportunity to do a Disney cruise. And you know we- James has a big heart, and it is very excited. And with developmental delays and his challenges, it can be hard for him to understand things. So we kind of waited until, we got a little bit closer, and then we kind of told him, things started to come in the mail, and he got like a little like a Disney cruise ticket, and he was so excited. And it made us so happy, because it's like, he has no idea what a Disney cruise is. He's been fortunate enough to go to Disneyland, but, for us, it was so excited to see him just be so excited and look forward to this. And it was truly a once in a lifetime opportunity, to be able to go on the cruise and to just really have it to be all about him. And for him to see the characters, for him to be able to have some special foods that he wouldn't normally have, let alone multiple times a day, or just the real Disney hospitality that was kind of catered, and it was really catered to him. It was really special. It's something that we will remember for a long time.
Well, speaking of his health, can you briefly share his early symptoms and how they led to his initial diagnosis?
It was when James was about 5.5 months old. It was, I'll never forget. It was the worst. It was the worst day of my life. He had been fussy throughout the night, so I told my wife, I was like, why don't you try and get a little bit of rest? I'll take James. We'll just play in the living room, and just I'll do the morning routine with him. And he went limp, and turned pale. And I thought, I didn't know what was happening. And thankfully he came out of it, after about um probably a minute, 90 seconds. And I known in my family as epilepsy, or no experience with a seizure, so it was all very you know, unknown to us.
I can't imagine anything more frightening than that. It must have been an incredibly scary time when he first got his diagnosis. So, what ultimately inspired you to establish the YWHAG Foundation? And what were you hoping to do for families like yours?
My son was, in the hospital during that time, and it wasn't until about a year later that he got genetic tested. It literally was, he was about a year and a half old when we finally got that diagnosis. So it was, I guess, again, to give you a little more context, it was like, we got the diagnosis, and, you know, the, the genetic, the geneticist, the genetic doctor was like, here's this, your son has this ultra rare YWHAG genetic mutation. There was a paper published on it about 2 years ago. Sorry, it is what it is. Good luck, keep in touch. So that's kind of, sent me down this journey.
And for any listeners who are unfamiliar with YWHAG related disorders, which is probably most of them, how would you explain the condition and how it affects James?
Yeah, absolutely. It's so his body doesn't make enough of this protein called the gamma protein, and it's one of seven key proteins in, that the brain needs. And basically it manifests itself in a lot of different ways. Is that, he has epilepsy, developmental delays, cognitive impairment, overall just weakness, and it's hard for him to. This protein's involved in cell signaling, and it's hard for him. You can kind of see from, again, as a parent, it's like I don't have a, molecular background, but I can see in my child how making connections or putting pieces of a puzzle, literal or figurative, together to be able to, kind of learn and grow, that's hard for him. So it's, you could talk to James, you could show him something, you could do it for him, he could do it, and then you ask him to do it again, and he just doesn't understand. It's hard for him. So, it manifests itself in a lot of different ways.
What recent progress has been made that has made you feel hopeful?
Yeah, one of the things that there's a lot of, I like to think when you get any sort of news, especially having to um get the diagnosis of a rare disease, is you kind of have the stages of grief, right? And I remember, when James, we got that phone call that James had the the YWHAG mutation, and it was a lot, it was a wave of emotion, and the worst feeling was hopelessness. And like, does anyone care? Is anyone looking at this? Like, what does the future look like for James? What does it look like, for his outlook on life, and, for us to help him? And for me, every little bit of, progress, or, you know, publications or research articles, or, you know, grants, or, developments about, the YWHG gene is exciting, because it's like, okay, there's progress being made. There's, people care about this. There's forward momentum that is being done to help James and others, and it's exciting. We've made a lot of progress with the foundation, but, arguably, one of the most exciting things is the grant from Charles River and this ASO design. So, there's all these different things, with drug repurposing and, kind of natural history study. It's, those are all kind of, I'd say building blocks to, or band-aids to try and help, improve a patient's quality of life. And James, help. And, ASO is like kind of, that would be a huge breakthrough for James and others in our community of, it's like this has the potential to really change his life and alter how his body is able to function, and hopefully, really change the trajectory of his future by being able to, bring his body more in balance with, where it needs to be, if this ASO is, successful. And, there's many steps, but each step is, exciting, because it's like that's closer to, a brighter future for James.
Where do you hope the YWHAG Foundation will be in 5 to 10 years? And what do you hope will change for children with this mutation?
It's been really exciting to see the progress that we've been able to make in just, I started the foundation about 3 years ago. So, having personally felt, that feeling of there's, where do we go? There's nothing out there. There's a research paper, to having researchers committed to studying this, to having, iPSCs, to have a mouse model developed specifically for the mutation, and having people interested and engaged, and having having researchers publish articles that you're like, I'm in contact with that researcher. I helped, get interest. It's really exciting to see momentum because, you know, I'll be the first to tell you, I haven't done this before. I don't, all I have is passion and a drive to help James and those in the community, and no one's going to fight harder for our kids' future than 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 a parent. So I want to continue to get grants, to get research interest, to have more opportunities like this that Charles River has afforded me, to be able to talk, to spread the word of mouth, because you know that's how I've learned that networking is so important. So again, thank you to everyone for this opportunity, because that's you know 3 years ago I never thought that I'd be able to meet with a a company such as Charles River and talk about my son's rare disease. That's I was just trying to get someone to hear me out, let alone now have the opportunity to have an ASO developed for it. It's incredible. So I'm really excited to continue to push for new research to be done and interest.
What advice would you have for families who are getting a similar diagnosis?
Reach out, learn. Don't take no for an answer. If anyone, if I can do it, anyone can do it. I never read a research paper in my life, and there I was, at 11, 12 o'clock at night reading a research paper about my son's rare disease and trying to figure out how to find this person's email to contact them. So just don't take no for an answer. And I've learned along the way that's one of the doctors that my son saw he gave us kind of the harsh reality that I'm glad that he that I didn't let it stick to me, but he told me, in a very, kind of caring way, is that, the problem with rare diseases such as the one that James has is that no one's ever going to pay attention to him because, it just commercially doesn't make sense in the world we live in. And, hearing that was like, well, is this just is what it is? And just keep pushing, keep asking questions, keep meeting with people. I've had 3 Zoom meetings to finally meet someone that can help and wants to. So there's phenomenal researchers and people that care and want to help, but you just have to keep pushing. And it's not an easy road, but I I I want to look back and say I've done everything I can to help James and our patient community, and I feel like I'm doing the absolute best I can, and I'm excited at the progress we've made and what the future holds.
It's rough for a doctor to be so blunt, but you have to start with the truth because that's where the foundation is going to be laid. There's no point in starting at the beginning if you don't even know where the beginning is.
Right, exactly. And don't be afraid to ask questions. My son was getting an EEG done with a local company that it was a EEG where you go to a clinic's office and they do it in the office and you get to go home instead of being the whole hospitalized, have an IV. And we were just talking to the guy and talking about, this rare disease. He's like, you know what? I'm going to give you the name of the 3 people. You should really reach out to them. And one person actually, was a phenomenal person and kind of did the same thing. He started a foundation for his son, and I consider him a mentor, and I keep in touch with him, and he's just really pushed and guided me and helped make connections for me that led me to where I am today. So just ask, what's the worst someone could say? Or no, I'm sorry. Then okay, just keep keep asking, keep looking. So
That doesn't surprise me. I've met with a lot of parents and a lot of people who have started foundations for rare diseases, and they are without fail some of the most generous people with their time, with their expertise. They are ready to tell anyone anything about the process that would be helpful for them.
it it's been incredible because some of the researchers that I'm in contact with, one of the doctors specifically, he's just an incredibly kind person and has done so much for us. And he actually had a parents that had her son was diagnosed, and he connected me with her, and it was really exciting because it's very overwhelming, but I was like, I know how this person feels, and to be able to share everything. And she was able to start her own foundation for her child, so it was incredible, and it's exciting to be able, like, you need to reach out to these people, and she was able to successfully get a grant. It was exciting. So, it's this rare disease community. No one wants to be a part of it, but I've met some incredible people along the way.
Well, empathy is a powerful tool. Well, thank you so much, Andrew, for joining us and for sharing your story. We're very happy to be able to share your story and bring more attention to this disease and to your foundation.
Yeah, and again, just thank you, everyone, and on the Charles River team. The the sense of hope, and just, I guess, the showing that people like everyone here cares for me, my son, is just, it's incredible. So thank you very much, and it means more than you guys know. So thank you. Thank you.